So week 9 is in the books, and there was a couple major things that happened this weekend, Tyler. But specifically for the Dallas Cowboys, some major changes are going to be happening here. Jerry Jones recently came out and said they're expecting Dak to potentially go on IR here for his hamstring injury that he suffered, a major hamstring injury. And this will be a 4-game stretch without, one of the better quarterbacks in the league. For a lot of fantasy teams, this is your QB1. But then this doesn't just impact Dak Prescott. This impacts a couple pieces here on this Dallas Cowboys offense that's already kind of been a little lackluster if we're really being honest with ourselves. So for Dak, man, this is a tough pill to swallow because you probably, were relying on him as a back-end QB1 option. He's been disappointing you this whole time. We'll get into CeeDee Lamb in a second, but Dak does provide a really big anchor for a lot of these key parts, including CeeDee Lamb, Jake Ferguson, and even just moving the ball up and down for Rico Dowdle, man. Talk to me how you're feeling about this injury.
Yeah, it's a big blow to the offense, obviously. And CeeDee, I mean, I don't know if he's going to miss time or how long he's going to be out for as well. So
they're saying week to week.
Yeah, and usually we know that that's probably like a few weeks at least. So it just becomes an offense that I really don't want any part of. And the one thing that was nice too is we actually got to see Rico Dowdle in a full role, like the workhorse role, and he looked good. And it's been something that I just don't understand why this team hasn't done that all year long, why they continue to just throw out Zeke. And I'm sorry, but Zeke we know he's been washed. He's averaging 3.1 yards per carry in the season. Like he's done. So I don't know what's going on there, but just this offense now becomes, an offense that has been disappointing really the whole season, but becomes an offense that I just would want no part of whatsoever going forward right now.
Yeah, and this is tough, man, because we're probably going to get like Cooper Rush, or even there's been a lot of, clamor out there for Trey Lance potentially starting here. But it's like this, it does make a fragile offense even more so. And it'll be tough, like CeeDee Lamb without Dak. I don't know if we can consider him a top 3 guy anymore. I think it significantly limits his ceiling. And that's if he can even play this week. There's like we talked about, he's week to week. That could be this week and the following week, especially like knowing that Dak is on IR now. CeeDee probably going to play this thing a little bit safer now that he's got the bag. So I think for Dak, it's one of those things like if he's good enough to hold, like I think he's a player. Obviously, this is week 10, so we're talking about week 14 is the earliest return for Dak if he does get placed on IR this week, which is the expectation. He's still a hold if you have IR spots. If you do not have an IR spot and you're in a single QB league, I'm not sure that you really need to keep Dak. Like, honestly, I just don't know. I don't see a reason why if there's no IR spot.
Especially if you're trying to win.
There's
just need a
unless you're a playoff team. You're right. If you're a playoff team, maybe. But he's a tough player to hold on to. And I think with CeeDee Lamb, like, you're going to get lowballed right now.
Well, and if you're a playoff team, you probably have somebody better. Or maybe you have Dak. I don't know. He's been okay, but there's probably a chance that you could have, Jane Daniels and Dak, and you're still kind of just holding on. Like, there's no point. So if I'm a team that's like fighting for my life, I have 4 wins or even 3, and maybe trying to outside. Like, I want to hold on to Dak. There's no reason to. You're trying to win right now. He's just eating up a roster spot.
He ain't been good enough to keep.
Yeah, like he has been good enough to keep. So in a 1 quarterback league, honestly, I wouldn't even worry. Like I'd rather have, and I know I keep talking about, I'd rather have Drake May. Like, just roster Drake May over him. So yeah, and I don't think he's worth a spot. Obviously, like we'll have to see what happens with CeeDee. Definitely hold him, obviously. Right. But if Dak is not held, well, we already know if Dak, he hasn't officially been placed on IR, right?
No, not officially placed. This is Jerry Jones coming out
just saying that
Tuesday. Today's Tuesday. Yeah, they're saying he's likely to go on IR, which probably means he's going on IR.
Yeah, so if he's going to go on IR, I mean, that really just kind of kills CeeDee, in my opinion, for a little bit. I don't think it kills him. I don't want to say that. But he's definitely, in my opinion, I wouldn't say a wide receiver 1. I think he's more of a wide receiver 2 going forward. With that,
I have the numbers. If it's Cooper Rush, which is probably the expectation, like he's been number 2 in line, and I know everybody wants to see Trey Lance. I would love to see Trey Lance. I've been a big Trey Lance supporter.
Yeah,
it's Cooper Rush. He's probably going to be the starter on this team unless Cooper Rush is just terrible. But The numbers with CeeDee Lamb in his 5 starts, this is something I got off of Twitter. So this is in 2022. 5 receptions, 68 yards, no touchdown. 5 receptions, 53 yards. 6 receptions, 97 yards with a touchdown. 8 receptions, 87 with a touchdown. And 7 for 75. All those games he had 8+ targets. So it's not like it's over for CeeDee Lamb and that you need to get rid of him. It's just the ceiling. We're not going to see a whole lot of those 150 with 10 catch days and 2 touchdowns. Cooper Rush doesn't really provide that.
He's a solid wide receiver too. This is essentially what he'll be. I think he'll be, he'll have his moments where he'll probably be more of a dud, but it will be interesting to see what happens, because if Dak does get placed on IR and this team is sitting here at 3-5 and they play Philly this week and they lose to Philly, I just feel like this kind of opens up a door where do they just hang it up for the rest of the season? You know what I mean? Because I don't know if there's anything to really play. This is a tough stretch. They get the Eagles, Texans, Commanders for the next 3 weeks. It's a really tough stretch of games where they could honestly, without Dak and CeeDee, if they don't have those two, that's probably 3 losses.
Well, and they got to pay Micah Parsons still. So it's like there's still the money factor here. You got to get a high draft pick in order to get some help. Like this team's not going to be able to just go sign up. They couldn't even sign Derrick Henry this offseason, and they needed a running back. Mm-hmm. So to me, like you got to get some talent in the building, and having a top 10 pick would all but shore up some of these problems that the Cowboys have. So while I don't, in trading away a 4th-round pick, by the way, side note, trading away a 4th-round pick when you're a team that's going to need a pick for Jonathan Mingo is absolutely absurd.
Yeah, I don't know.
But it just feels like they're playing for a playoff spot here, more so than they're going to be playing. Obviously, they're not going to be in contention for a Super Bowl. The one question I'll have here is, what if things get super ugly with Dallas? Like there's that possibility as well. And I don't know that it goes down that route. I think Cooper Rush can hold the fort for 4 games and probably get a win or 2 here. But what if it's Trey Lance? And now we got CeeDee Lamb, we got Jake Ferguson, because we're talking high-end wide receiver 2, back-end wide receiver 1 with Cooper Rush. Do we get like wide receiver 3 now with Trey Lance, or is it? I think just the range of outcomes becomes a lot more unclear.
I don't think this is. See here, there's a difference between when Cooper Rush was there before to this team now. This isn't a good football team.
You're right.
They're not good.
You're right.
This isn't so. I really don't think they're going to win a game in this 3 stretch of games.
Philly, Houston, Washington.
Giants. No, that's brutal. So now you're talking about a team that, what are they currently? 3-5. So they're 3-8. There's no, unless they run the table, they still play Philly. They still play the Eagles. They still play the Commanders again. They play Tampa Bay with Mike Evans being back. Like, I just don't see this team making a playoff push. This is it's not a very good football team. They've beaten the Giants. They beat the Browns. They beat the Steelers, and like this, when they had Fields, it was like fluky there kind of, but could have lost that game at the last second. So it's just like, I don't think that's a good football team. So I wouldn't even be shocked if maybe like they lose three games in a row, and then that 4th one, when they get the Giants, you could potentially see Trey Lance just to see what's this kid got, because we kind of know what Cooper Rush is. So I wouldn't be shocked. I do think it'll probably be Cooper Rush in the beginning, but I wouldn't be shocked if they drop the next 2 and then it's like, all right, maybe we bring on Trey Lance and just kind of see what we have here going forward. Maybe it's a piece that we can trade off next year if somebody wants to take a shot on him or something. I don't know. So it'll be interesting.
It's ugly. It's ugly right now for this Dallas
I think it will get ugly 100%.
And there's no light at the end of the tunnel for this thing, like none. And so I think at this point we got to kind of just put the bow on a Cowboys season, unfortunately, and probably for fantasy, we ain't talking a whole lot more about this team outside of CeeDee Lamb every now and then. Mm-hmm. We had another team, Tyler, had some good stuff happen with them. They were missing their star receiver, DK Metcalf, but JSN broke out in a major way. The game we've all been waiting for from him. And, I was really big on his opportunity. I'm sure you were as well with this new offense. Obviously, this was the hype of the offseason. Like, JSN should be back. A lot of people didn't believe it. He did us dirty in the rookie year. He's behind DK Metcalf And to be honest, to some extent, they were kind of right with the way this thing had all started out for Jackson Smith and Jigba. He wasn't this. I mean, he'd been playing well, but I think we were expecting like a major ascension, and he proved what we were kind of expecting over this last week. So I think for JSN, this is, I think the big question here is it for real? Like that's the question mark that I think a lot of people are going to have with JSN. When you have, you have 180 yards, you have 2 touchdowns, it's easy to get excited about that. But I look at the inconsistency that we've gotten over the course of this year. We've had a 20-point game and nothing really else. And we've had spots where he's got the targets and not the production. This is a game without DK Metcalf against a Rams team that we've seen be beat at times throughout the season. They're heading into the bye right now. Tyler, I don't know. He's the wide receiver 14 right now in PPR leagues. I don't think it holds. But how are you feeling? You think this breakout is for real? Like he's a wide receiver 2 moving forward?
This is really tough, and the reason being is just because I love JSN coming out. I thought he was a really good prospect. I had him really high, even in my dynasty rankings. His first year coming out, I thought he was going to be really good, and he really kind of hasn't been. And we can say it's been, the offense and this and that, but even this year, like he was supposed to take over Tyler Lockett, and we got that one, but when you go and look at his stats, it is really crazy that he's the wide receiver 14.
Yeah.
Because he has 2 finishes inside the top 10 and then no finishes inside the top 30. Weekly top 30 finishes. So it's just been those 2 big weeks, and like this week was a monster week. And I also kind of think it just speaks volume to the wide receiver position this year, where it's been kind of tough because there's been a lot of injuries and a lot of inconsistency at the wide receiver position this year compared to years past. But honestly, if I had JSN in redraft, obviously in Dynasty, I'm probably going to just hold on to this, maybe flip them if I can. I don't know exactly what you could get, because I do think there are some people out there that are definitely like JSN zealots that will overpay for JSN for sure.
Finally, it happened.
Finally it had. Like he's one of these players that there's a lot of people that were very, very high on him. So you could probably try to sell high. In redraft, I do think that I would use this opportunity to sell high. If I can, I would try to sell him as like a wide receiver 2. And if I can get good wide receiver 2, like a wide receiver 2 that I feel really good about, and make like kind of that lateral move, that's something I probably would do. But it all comes down to just finding that one guy that will definitely overpay. Like find your Ohio State fan in your friend group, you know what I mean? And send some offers that way.
Well, he's a player. He was hyped. I mean, you come out your first round pick. We're expecting you last year to do damage and be a top 30 receiver on the draft, and you're not. And then you come in this year, you disappoint, and it always feels vindicated when you're like, now is the time. When you see the big game, you're like, this is why. And I think that wide receiver 14 stamp of approval is the moment you need, especially they're going on a bye this week. So especially if you have a team that's under 500, like you got to get JSN off of your team because of the inconsistency. He's going to be, he's nowhere near what Jameson Williams is as far as variability, or like a Gabe Davis. But what he's shown this year is that he's tough to trust as a weekly flex. Like you talked about, you got 2 finishes inside the top 10, all the rest of them outside the top 30. Like that can hurt you most weeks. So I like JSN as a player. The one thing is he doesn't get consistent volume and he doesn't see consistent red zone looks. So when you see,
I would even say kind of he sees volume. It's just like
not consistent though, because sometimes we're talking 10 targets and other times we're talking 5, 6.
But when you actually look at, so the one thing that I'll say kind of like to counter that is that if you do look at like the metrics right now and you look at the receptions, he's currently 6 in receptions in the NFL. And where's his targets at? His targets are
he's 5th in the receptions.
He's 5th in the NFL in targets. Like he's seeing the volume. It's just not really translating the fantasy points. And the reason being is just like, I wonder what his ADOT. Yeah, his ADOT's low. It's 7.6. So he's like more of a volume-based wide receiver right now, where the volume is kind of there. But then once, like we saw this weekend, the volume's there. But then once you put in that alpha wide receiver that could command those high targets, the volume to sustain be a high volume type of producer, it just goes way down, and then he becomes like a not even like a wide receiver 3 kind of guys. What he kind of becomes instead of a wide receiver 2. So like the volume's there, but
That's
then
what
you
I
look at
mean,
the
though.
yards too.
I mean like wide receiver 2 volume. We're talking
Yeah,
like,
like he's not going to
eight
see
to
that with
ten.
DK.
Yeah, he's not
Yeah,
doing
with
that.
DK.
He's
Yeah,
not doing that. It's a tough player because I feel like we want to see him succeed and we want to see him in this role. And hopefully he proves me wrong and hopefully he proves a lot of us wrong and just continues to produce at this
I hope
pace.
so.
But it doesn't seem likely because DK, DK obviously coming off the injury, he was having a quiet year too. Like
Yeah, he's
he
good.
was having a really good year. And I think
He's really
the
good.
main thing is like Geno. Geno's turned
Yeah,
from like, do we trust Geno to like he is a starting QB1 for most teams right now, and you got him as a back end QB2. Like, I think if you have Geno right now, you could probably move even off of whoever your starter was and get trade value for them. Like if he's your backup in a single QB league, the schedule is, you got the Niners, you got Arizona, you got the Jets, Arizona, the Packers, Minnesota, and Chicago at Chicago. So there's a couple landmines in there, but for the most part, this is a very nice schedule fantasy wise for Geno. And I think that if I had him, I would trust. I maybe would want one more quarterback just in case you had a landmine matchup. But like Geno has proven this year that he is all the way back, and it wasn't a fluke what he did 2 years ago. Bad offense last year, and especially with this emergence of JSN, I think you can trust Geno as a QB1 in single QB leagues.
one last thing I'll say about JSN is that he's still young. He's really young. Like he's the same age as Marvin Harrison Jr. So he's really young. And maybe this is kind of the little spark that he needed, confidence Geno needed in him, and maybe this does go to the end of the season. We'll see. I would be trying to sell, but if you can't sell for a decent price, I wouldn't just sell to sell. But if I can sell for a solid wide receiver too that I feel good about, then I would do that. If not, I would just hold and hopefully, maybe this game kind of turn in a corner.
You move JSN with another piece to upgrade. Like
Yeah,
this
you
is
could do
the
that.
time to do that. You move JSN, a piece that's on a buy for you right now, and you find another piece that's kind of one of the sexy names I would say right now in fantasy, or maybe just a running back that's healthy, a wide receiver that's healthy for some team that needs help. And I would say I would target one of those high end wide receiver twos that's maybe had a couple disappointing weeks here, and go get yourself a solid player. Who's turned into a solid wide receiver too, it seems like. The return of DeAndre Hopkins, 2 touchdowns on Monday Night Football for the Kansas City Chiefs. And now, the first week of the year, or first week as a Chief, he only had 2 catches. We're kind of like, man, what's going on? The usage. And then we got Andy Reid saying, you know what? He's going to play that role. He's going to play that Rashee Rice role. He's going to play that Juju Smith-Schuster role. And sure as shit, we saw it on Monday night and had a really good throwback performance for DeAndre Hopkins. Mahomes got banged up a little bit, was still out there slinging it to D-Hop. And we see this little blend now of like D-Hop and Kelsey that looks like it might be unstoppable. When you get D-Hop downfield, catching the ball between 3 defenders like D-Hop in 2016, we're looking at this thing like, man, this could be really special, man. I think most people were either giving up on D-Hop and dropped him, or maybe you thought he was a flex at best, or he was on your bench. He's a wide receiver too the rest of the way, ain't he?
Yeah, I would say he's right around there for sure. We know how good Patrick Mahomes is. He played really well. One thing that I will say is that it is Tampa Bay, and Tampa Bay has given up a lot of points to opposing wide receivers, tight ends. But when you look at this, it's just that for as much as a guy like Xavier Worthy that you kind of were hoping he'd have a breakout, he hasn't done enough to warrant really being a breakout candidate. And like this game was kind of there was potential that a breakout was starting to happen, but now 2 targets, 0 catches, and he had that 1 catch in the very very beginning of the game where he just stepped down. You got to come down with that
rookie mistake.
Yeah, that was bad. But yeah, I mean, I could look at this offense and you got these 2 guys, these 2 veteran players that Patrick Mahomes just trusts, and they understand how to play the game and know what Patrick Mahomes is looking for when he needs it. They're able to look at the zones and just get open in the zones. I mean, I don't see why he couldn't be a wide receiver 2 going forward. And also the other thing too is that DeAndre Hopkins is a bigger wide receiver, and he's been throughout his career a pretty solid red zone target, which I think this offense kind of needs right now. They need that red zone threat as a wide receiver, and he offers that. So Yeah, I mean, I don't see why he couldn't be a wide receiver 2 going forward in fantasy football in this offense.
It's weird because at first when we came into the season, I was like, DeAndre Hopkins. It was all
I
the
didn't like him
MCL
at all.
stuff too. Like I was like, it's a name. I
Yeah.
was kind of
Well,
thinking
and
like
he was
it's
playing on the Titans. I mean,
yeah, it was bad too. Like, and I
this is
thought there was some optimism like with Levis. Like, even though that didn't pan out, I was thinking
yeah,
like, oh, maybe he'll provide flex value. This is a brand new territory for D Hop
yeah.
now. This
I mean,
is,
if we went back to the beginning of the season, we were like, all right, Rashee Rice is out for season, but D Hop is on the Chiefs. I mean, D Hop would have gone.
yeah. I mean, he would have been a top 15 receiver.
Would have gone at least I would say third round probably is where he would end up be going. So
But that's the value. Like, I think anybody that's watching, like, don't think this was a one-off. And even though I know you talked about it, like this was a good matchup, maybe we're not getting 8 for 86 with 2 touchdowns every week. But like,
yeah,
this is a player who's probably going to see somewhere between 5 to 8 catches almost every game. I was really excited about Juju in this role, and it kind of reminded me of that, like high-end wide receiver 3. But D-Hop is better than Juju Smith, and I feel like that's going to elevate his ceiling on a weekly basis. So I think the one caveat I would say here is like when Juju gets back, when Pacheco gets back, when all the weapons are there for this team, maybe the ceiling's a little bit lower. But I think every week moving forward,
I think he'll be all right.
He's got to go in your lineup weekly.
Because the other thing too is I don't think Kelsey saw 16 targets in this game. I don't think Kelsey's gonna see 16 targets every single game. I still think Kelsey is going to be a 1A, 1B type of situation, though, with him and DeAndre Hopkins, and they'll be able to produce as long as they can stay healthy, too.
I don't know. Since Rashee Rice has been out, Kelsey has been a target hog.
He has.
I mean, double-digit targets in 3 out of the 4 games since Rashee Rice has gone down. I'm like, maybe he's back. Like, you think? Because I think there's a path for like the big conversation early on was like, yo, is Kelsey cooked? He's 35. Like, is he cooked? Is he washed? And I think like over these last couple of weeks, he's kind of proven like, yo, I'm back. I'm a big part of this offense. I ain't never left. The one thing we're not seeing out of him is like the volumes touchdown wise, but the yardage is there. Like, I don't know, is like Trey McBride. Anybody else? Evan Ingram, maybe Brock Bowers.
I want to say Brock. No, I mean, he's right there with him. Like, obviously, we've seen Kelsey take this. Once Rashee Rice, I think if Rashee Rice was healthy right now, right, I still think that Rashee Rice would be probably going on the tear that he was early in the season. But once that injury happened, I definitely think that like now Kelsey has turned from like this more mid to back end tight end one to now, one of the elite tight end ones in fantasy football. And I still think Trey McBride's there. The one thing that I'll say for Kelsey compared to like those other guys is just, we even saw with Kyle Pitts where he had like the 40-yard touchdown catch. I don't think that Kelsey has that in his repertoire anymore where he's going to have these long touchdown catches. A lot of his stuff last night, if you're watching, was close to the line of scrimmage, low A dot kind of stuff, just over the middle, keeping the chains moving. I think that'll continue to be that kind of guy, and he'll probably be a little bit more valuable in full point PPR formats but we've seen it. It's been a couple weeks now where they try this. They've done this a lot with Kelsey, the little shovel pass around the goal line to try to get him in there. And it just hasn't happened. Even last night, you saw where he was able to take Levante David and he had to commit to Kelsey at the goal line, which opened up the back for DeAndre Hopkins, which is just very good play design. But like you'll see stuff with that with Kelsey where I think the touchdowns will kind of come. I just think he belongs in that tier though with those other guys for sure going forward.
He's elite, and I think the discussions there for tight end one. I think obviously with this offense,
obviously if he sees 16 targets, it's probably going to be.
He's seeing 16 and 12. Like I just think anywhere double digit wise, we know Kelsey is elite, and I think the one thing that like if it comes, the touchdowns come, it's a wrap. And whoever bought low on him, you did a good job this during the season if you were able to snag Kelsey away. But I think the one caveat here is like this the D-Hop ascension, this Travis Kelsey looking back to normal. I think a couple weeks ago, both you and I were like, Mahomes, are you back? Are you a fade? It's time to talk about it now. Second half of the year, like, where do we put Mahomes? They've already had their bye. I don't know if you can go buy low on Mahomes anymore, but like, it's only up for him here with this cast now. He's back in the QB1 conversation, right?
I would, but I would say more of back end QB1. And the reason why is just because there's some elite quarterbacks. I mean, Jalen Hurts is playing out of his mind right now. Like the dude's been
Yeah.
balling out. Josh Allen, elite. Jaden Daniels, we know how good he is. Even Kyler, like he has his moments. He was bad this weekend, but the week prior, he's good. And he just has that rushing upside. So I would say more of like even Joe Burrow. I mean, this week threw for 5 passing touchdowns. It just comes down to like, is this team going to, kind of be like this offense? Because it wasn't until like later in the game that this offense really started to do that well. Like in the beginning of the game, it was what 3,
But he's been
10,
consistent
7.
though. Like
He's been consistent, but it
I look at
hasn't
like
been like
Dak obviously on IR, but like you start getting to the back end of that. Like you talked Kyler, I'd rather have Mahomes than Kyler.
no, I'd rather have Kyler.
Not giving Mahomes. Like I just feel like the floor.
No.
Like you're getting 250 and 2 touchdowns. It's just are we getting those upside games? And I think we're going to see more of that now with a guy like
I want to say last week he didn't even throw for a touchdown. Like I just think that we're kind of overreacting to one game against Tampa Bay.
But you get a guy like Kyler Murray though. What did Kyler do this weekend against the Bears? He didn't do shit.
Yeah, but Kyler I want to say it was last week or 2 weeks ago, had a 40-yard touchdown run. Patrick Mahomes can't do that. Like there's only a few.
Pat Mahomes can have a 40-yard touchdown. He can have a 20, 30-yard touchdown run.
He's not going to do that like Kyler is.
But
the other thing is,
but Kyler will also had a game where he won't throw for 200 yards.
I understand that completely. But like I think that Patrick Mahomes belongs in the back tier for the one reason. Now, if he's going to be throwing, 3 touchdown passes every single game, which he could potentially do for sure. Everything in the beginning of the season hasn't really led us to, and maybe DeAndre Hopkins is kind of like the key that unlocks this offense a little bit. We'll see. I still think that but like a guy, and I'm going to keep coming back to him because he just had 17 points and he threw for 200 passing yards and threw 2 interceptions, but he had basically 100 rushing yards, and that's Drake May. I mean, why is Drake May not in back end QB1 conversation then? Like those are the kind of quarterbacks I want personally. I want the guys who are running the football. I think Patrick Mahomes belongs in the back end to mid QB1 range. Sure, he can be in that conversation, but he's not an elite quarterback one, in my opinion.
He's not an elite quarterback one, but he's back in the circle of trust. I'll take him over CJ Stroud, put it that way. Like I'm taking more CJ Stroud over Kyler. I think he's right back there mid-tier. Like right around Burrow territory is where I got
CJ Stroud's offensive line is also in shambles right now. Yeah. That offensive line is.
You know who's elite though? You already talked about it. Jalen Hurts, bro. Jalen Hurts is elite, man. And you know what? You talked about him. You said he was your QB1. I don't know if he's quite there, QB1, but had another monster game yet again. And the rushing touchdowns are coming in bunches right now.
He's almost double digits, isn't he?
Yeah, he's already. I mean, his season line was like 9.5. He's probably going to crush.
He's going to crush.
He got 5 in 2 games. So
yeah, he's going to crush that.
He's obviously he's playing well, and I think we can acknowledge what he's doing. Just rushing the football, but what the Saquon, bro?
Mm-hmm.
We can talk about Jalen Hurts, but I want to do that another day. That fucking play, bro, it lets you know he is on a different stratosphere than everybody else. The spin move to half spin to jumping, hurdling over the defender backwards. That's some shit that you can't even video game that, man. And I think because I know damn well I was not ready to write off Saquon. I was very excited about this move to the Philadelphia Eagles, talking about the offensive line, playing with Jalen Hurts. The one thing I was like, man, I don't know if he can hold up his value without the touchdowns. That was the biggest thing for me because Jalen Hurts vulturing all the touchdowns. We haven't seen a whole lot of touchdowns earlier from Saquon, but it has not mattered. Saquon, is he the RB1 the rest of the way?
I would say he's up there. It's really tough with just how Derrick Henry's playing. I want to say Derrick Henry's probably RB1. I got to imagine he's RB1. I don't know.
He's got to be RB1 on a per game basis, though, because I think the Eagles already had their bye, right?
Yeah.
I want to say the Eagles had their bye. Yeah, Eagles had their bye early. I want to see what he is on a per game basis because that's with what I see.
Derrick Henry's 1 and per game. He's at
per game.
I want to say it's like split 22. They're both averaging 22 fantasy points per game. And I want to say they're both on pace for 2,000 yards.
That's insane.
Which is crazy. Yeah.
That's insane. Saquon, the thing is he just adds so much, like maybe he doesn't get the touchdowns that Derrick Henry gets, but with the receiving work,
Right.
It's
No,
right
I
there, bro.
he's right. They're right there for sure. And what's also crazy, I looked at this. Derrick Henry has 25 red zone touches this year. 25. Jalen Hurts has 20.
God damn,
He's basically a running back.
that's
And he does have
insane.
8 rushing touchdowns. Derrick Henry, what's he have? 13? Yeah, well, total touchdowns. I don't know. But yeah, so to answer your question, I would say Saquon. I mean, he's definitely in top 3, right? Like you could say top 2. I mean, he's in that discussion. Um, Obviously Derrick Henry, because the one thing I'll say about Derrick Henry is, we've talked about this on the show before. I kind of wrote off Derrick Henry, or I didn't write him off. I recognize the
What'd you say
upside.
about him?
What did I say about
What'd you
him?
say about him? I'm asking. I'm asking.
Oh no,
What'd you say?
I said I recognize the upside that he could lead the league in touchdowns, 100%. It just, for me, and you know this, it's just how I draft. I don't like to draft the older running backs, and he was over 30, and at some point, maybe, I don't even know at this point if he's ever going to fall off, but like he's just been, out of his mind, and especially like this year, and we've talked about this in the past, right? It's going to get colder, and they're in Baltimore. The weather out there gets colder, so like this team is going to lean on the run even more.
Yeah.
Um, so it's just I still think he probably is, but if you want to, nitpick and say Saquon, I think that's completely fine as well.
I don't care which one it is because I drafted enough Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, Joe Mixon, Alvin Kamara. I drafted enough of those guys, and I'm ecstatic either way because I don't think age, obviously in redraft, like that's a big topic of conversation too, like age. And I think the dynasty has kind of spilled over into the redraft portion at times. But it doesn't matter because I feel like Saquon Barkley is he's in like his own tier. And I think Derrick Henry is in his own tier. And it's like both of these guys, what they're doing at this age is incredible. So I think you just got to account for the fact that like Derrick Henry is very like, which is a good thing, I think, in his opinion. He's going to be more touchdown dependent. And I think that's a very good thing for him because the Ravens rely on him in the red zone. And I think Saquon is just more receptions dependent and more receiving game dependent. And I think that's fine because the Eagles will use him in the receiving game and they'll use Jalen Hurts at the goal line. So I think they both, man, it's probably going to be a toss-up between the two. I don't mind having either one of them. And I think it just boils down to like what you need. Like rest of the season, I think I would slightly rank Saquon because the Ravens hadn't had their bye yet. That's literally the only reason. And then I'll be looking at playoff schedule. But when it comes to this Eagles offense too, like obviously we talked Jalen Hurts and briefly, and we talked Saquon Barkley, but AJ Brown potentially missing time as well, suffered an injury during the game. And the one thing about AJ Brown is he had been like the wide receiver one before this game. I want to say he was the wide receiver one on a points per game basis. And so, he's dealing with the day-to-day injury. We haven't really seen we've seen flashes out of Devontae Smith, and it's been kind of up and down with him as well. Had a good game. He's kind of bounced back here, but like, what do we do? Like these receivers, AJ Brown is clearly the one. Devontae Smith is clearly the two. But like, do you trust Devontae Smith as your wide receiver 2 every single week? I do, and I really like Devontae Smith's game. He has been a little tough to trust though, like on a consistency basis. Even though he's been double digits for most of the games, it feels like for whatever reason this year he's been a little bit harder to trust as a wide receiver 2.
Yeah, I still trust him as a wide receiver 3 or as a wide receiver 2, and I want to say, has there been any word? Is he just day to day?
And AJ Brown is day to day right now with his knee injury, and he already had an MRI that came back clean, so it should be
so
good to go
hopefully
with AJ Brown.
Maybe he doesn't play this week. I don't know. Maybe he sits out a week. But with Devontae Smith, it's just kind of like this, Batman Robin thing. And yeah, it's been a little bit. There's really, if you look at his stats on the season, I mean, he's finished inside the top 25 a bunch. There's the 1 week against the Giants, he scored the 0.8. Did he even play? He was healthy that game. What, the Saints game, right?
Yeah, I think that was when AJ Brown had first come back. Or the second game he was back.
Devontae Smith left because he got knocked out.
Yeah. You're right.
So he had that concussion that game. I don't even think he played the next week. So with Devontae Smith, though, like even if AJ Brown isn't there, like he's not the type of player that will be a high, the 30 fantasy points in a game. I think that he can get to 20, and that's just kind of where he is. He's a solid wide receiver too. That's what he is. And even with AJ Brown there or not there, that's just who he's going to be. It's the type of player he is. Him and Jalen Hurts have a good connection. Jalen Hurts gives his wide receivers a chance too all the time. He throws that rainbow ball out there, allows them to make plays. And you saw it this past weekend. We've seen it out of Devontae Smith a bunch too. I think he's just a very good real life wide receiver, especially like he's very suited to be a number 2 wide receiver with a true alpha. And that's exactly what they have there in Philadelphia. So I love Devontae Smith. I have a lot of Devontae Smith in fantasy leagues as my wide receiver too. So
what's funny about that is that, like, I remember last year early on, it was like, who's the number 1? Is it AJ Brown or is it Devontae Smith? And then as the year went on, it was like AJ Brown's the number 1. And then later it was like, oh, Devontae Smith. And it's like they both have their moments and their times where they take over this offense. I think, like, we were talking earlier about JSN, like that's a player I would pair together. I would pair him up with somebody else to go get Devontae Smith, because you get a lot of the same elements, just a little bit more consistency. And I think there's even more upside most weeks than what a JSN has, outside of, like, obviously last week. But I think you could sell JSN in like another smaller piece and probably go get Devontae Smith, and you'll probably be a lot better off.
Probably. That's a good trade.
But these elite receivers, bro, we talked to CeeDee Lamb, we've talked to AJ Brown. We haven't talked about your boy Chase in a while, but actually we talked Chase a little bit a couple weeks ago. We ain't talked about my boy Jettas. Huh.
We talk about him all the time.
How's he been doing? Isn't he like leading the league in receiving yards? Isn't he the league leader in receiving yards? Right now, isn't he like wide receiver? I want to say he's wide receiver 2 on a points per game base. What is he the best receiver in fantasy? Because to me, I feel like he's the best receiver in fantasy. We didn't even see no touchdown last week, and he had 20 points, man.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, he's one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. I've said this. I don't know if you're trying to like listen. This is a full-on bait. This is a bait, but Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. This is a full-on bait because we had this conversation early in the offseason. I said Justin Jefferson. Chase. You said Chase. Chase. It's still Chase.
No, it's Jefferson.
No, it's still Chase. All right. Here's the thing: is that I was kind of wrong about Sam Darnold, right? Sam Darnold. I still. I'm sorry.
I think you were wrong about Darnold. Let's be real. You were wrong.
No, because I'm still not sold on Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold, that game against Indianapolis, I'm sorry. If this guy did not have Justin Jefferson, he's a pumpkin. Like he's horrible. He's not good. He's not good.
But he does. He does, Tyler.
But even though he did not look that impressive on Sunday Night Football. Yeah, they played Sunday Night Football.
Yeah,
against the Colts. I'm not sold on. I'm still not sold on him. There's still plenty of football to be had, and this is where the football becomes real football, right? We know this. This is when the playoffs. Now the pressure's put on these teams. You start to have a couple more injuries that start to affect things. I still believe in Jay Jettis. I still believe Jay Jettis is one of the best wide receivers, if not the best wide receiver in the NFL. He can still produce. I've said all along, I just don't know if he can get to that 20 plus, like 21, 22 points per game to be the wide receiver 1. Currently, he's at 19. Could he get there? Yeah, potentially, absolutely. But I'd still rather have Chase. Maybe that's about it now. Probably Chase. I don't know.
So right now, the thing about Jettas that I love so much more than Jamar Chase is that we know he's going to be around 100 yards a game. We know this. It's just like he's going to be 20 fantasy points.
He's just used better.
He's used better. He's just a better football player than Chase.
I wouldn't even say better. Like the way that.
And you're not giving Darnold enough credit. Hold on. You're not giving Darnold enough credit because Darnold right now, for everything that he's not, he can get the ball to Justin Jefferson. I don't think he's a great quarterback, but he's not just complete. He's not Gardner Minshew out there with the football. Like he at
least think that Gardner Minshew would be decent in this system.
Maybe, but we got Darnold in this system right now. Darnold's been like a top 12 quarterback. I want to say he's been a top 12 guy.
I'm still not believing. I'm sorry.
And I just think with Justin Jefferson, it's like he is elite. It's when you have the receiver. It's like you have a bicycle and it has one good tire and one tire that's almost flat. You can still get somewhere with that motherfucker because the good tire is good. And Justin Jefferson is the good tire right now for this Vikings regular ass offense. And the thing is, he hadn't even had a whole lot of 100-yard games. He's had back-to-back now. He had gone like the longest stretch in his career with that 100-yard game. And now we're going to see multiple of those.
Because he is fucking Sam Darnold.
But we got this second half of the season. If we start seeing multiple touchdown games, we see more of these 100-yard games, we see a push for him to be that 1,800-yard to 2,000-yard receiver. I just don't see, there's not a world where he's not the number one wide receiver. And Jamar Chase is probably somewhere floating around number 3, 4, or 5.
I don't think he will be, but we'll see. I think he'll be right around the top 5. He'll probably be 3. Chase in this Cincinnati offense. Because here's the thing. This is the thing, right? One team has a good defense, the other one doesn't. One team's going to be in shootouts, the other one, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what their schedule looks like. I honestly have not looked at Minnesota's schedule. So
Minnesota has the upcoming schedule. They got Jacksonville, which will probably see a 200-yard game out of Jettis. Jacksonville, Tennessee, Chicago. So a couple good corners there. Arizona, Atlanta, Chicago again, Seattle, and Green Bay.
Yeah, we'll see. Chase will be wide receiver 1.
Chase has been carried by that 40-point game. That's how I feel right now. He's been carried.
He's an explosive player.
Darnold. So you think Darnold's just like? Do you think because he's top? I think he's top 12 right now. You think you think he just falls off a cliff, or you think like
no? I don't
bad quarterback, but in fantasy that could mean something completely different.
Yeah, I don't think that he's going to fall off a cliff. I don't think he's as good as like his stats suggest right now. Like I don't. When I was watching him the other night, he's just not. He doesn't do anything that impresses me. Like I don't know. Like I don't.
You got to take the emotion out of it because that's
I don't have.
We
emotion.
all do as fantasy players. We look at the real. We look at the tape and we let that affect our judgment.
Who has came to a brand new system that we know this system is good. It's a very good system playing with one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, right? He has a very good, then he has a number 2 target. He's also getting, TJ Hawkinson. I just don't think that Sam Darnold, we'll see. This is like I said, this is the time of the year where these games become very, very, it's not like I'm not trying to say that the whole year isn't tough, but this is where playoff implications are on the lines. Team, you have a target on your back, especially Minnesota, because you're one of the best teams in the league. These teams are gunning for you. Like shit gets really real, and teams crank it up a notch. They play playoff football this time of the year.
They're one of the best teams in the league because they got a good quarterback right now. Quarterback that's playing well in their system. He's a good system quarterback.
We'll see.
He's thrown multi-touchdowns in 6 games this year. I didn't realize that. I'm just looking at it right now. Yeah, 6 games out of the 80s plays throwing multi-touchdowns.
Yeah, he's all right.
You going to watch by the end of the season? You're going to be showing him some love. You're going to be like, Sam Darnold's my favorite quarterback.
No, he'll never be. He's basically Jared Goff.
Yeah, you hate Jared Goff too. That's crazy.
I don't hate Jared Goff.
You cool with Jared Goff now?
No, I mean, I've always liked Jared Goff, but give me Drake May over both of them.
Drake and May season. Here it is. Well, listen, we also had a trade deadline today. And if you're watching, that means it's already passed and we've already talked about it. But as of now, we are an hour and a half away from the trade deadline. Typically, NFL trade deadline, we don't see a lot of buzzer beaters when it comes to trades. So we probably have a majority of the trades in the book. But let's talk about the 3 major ones I think that have somewhat fantasy implications. Let's lead off with I think the one that has the biggest fantasy implication, and that's Mike Williams to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And Mike Williams obviously disgruntled with the Jets. Obviously when they traded for Devontae Adams, that kind of just left a hole for him. And Mike Williams had been a really good receiver for the Los Angeles Chargers. Head over to Pittsburgh, Tyler, your team. Head over to the Pittsburgh Steelers, where they've needed a secondary receiver. Like Van Jefferson been absolutely mid. You get Calvin Austin, who's their big play guy, but definitely not a consistent piece. Mike Williams able to bring another big body receiver, which Russell Wilson does like. Is he a wide receiver 3 flex? Does he have that? We stretching to that yet, or are we not sold on this Mike Williams move for fantasy?
Yeah. I don't know, Jim.
I don't know,
Jim. No, I think that it could potentially be like more flex, sure. I mean, I think this is a better real life move than maybe fantasy football. The Steelers desperately needed a wide receiver too, right? You have Calvin Austin, who's We haven't seen Roman Wilson. I mean, what the hell is going on with him? So this is a team that just desperately needed a wide receiver too. I will say, if Russell Wilson, I mean, I still think that Russell Wilson has some left in the tank. I think he's looked good, and I think that there's definitely potential. And it honestly, kind of fits what Russell Wilson's play style, where he'll throw that rainbow ball out there and give his guy a chance. And I think Mike Williams has been a very good jump ball wide receiver throughout his entire career. Uh, and we'll see. And he's also a good, red zone target. He's a big body kind of guy. So potentially for fantasy football, maybe gets a wide receiver 3 range. I think he's more of a flex, but in terms of real life, I just think it's a very good real life move for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
I think this might change some things for the Steelers too, right? Where we've seen like George Pickens, a lot of times he's that downfield, go up and get it guy. And this offseason, they talked about moving him around the offense, right? He's complained about seeing more opportunities, right? Free Pickens, right? Like he's been wanting the ball a little bit more. And I think this gives them the flexibility now to have a nice outside receiver in Mike Williams and move George Pickens around this offense a little bit better and have him be a threat. So I think for Russ, this is actually a really good thing. Like Russ has been a mid-tier QB2, I think. I would almost like elevate him into like a high-end QB2, giving him this weapon. I think it's easy to forget what Mike Williams was because the ACL injury, but it's like we've seen flashes of it even when he was on the Jets this year. I think the big implication is that I think like George Pickens fully goes into the circle of trust now. I think he becomes like a major asset, even more so than he was. Like if you had him as a wide receiver 3 or you were a little bit concerned, for me, the ability to move him in and out of the slot when they need to and get him some easy opportunities is going to do wonders for his fantasy value. So I think Pickens to me is probably like a top 15 to 20 guy rest of the way at least. And I think Mike Williams is on that flex radar. And if he sticks, if we find that Russ is actually giving him opportunities, I think he could be a weekly back end wide receiver 3 just because of the potential red zone looks. Like you can't just stuff Najee at the goal line every time. You got to give opportunities elsewhere. And Mike Williams is a big body that can go out and get it. So I would be picking up Mike Williams just in case. And my recommendation is if it doesn't pan out in 2 weeks, wipe your hands with him, let it go.
Yeah, that's fair.
I think when you play with with a good quarterback, it changes things. We're seeing it with kind of like D-Hop and D-Hop and Mahomes. I'm not saying Russ is Mahomes. I'm not saying Aaron Rodgers is trash. It's just sometimes the situation can dictate a lot of things.
Well, and especially after they traded for Devontae. I mean, that killed. And Mike Williams was coming for he was starting to come back off the ACL, and then they trade for Devontae, and you get Garrett Wilson, Devontae, you have no shot.
Yeah.
At producing anything.
What about Khalil Herbert? He was traded from the Bears to the Bengals, and we saw Khalil Herbert be a 1,000-yard back for this team. They obviously invested in DeAndre Swift after his injury last year. They drafted Roshan Johnson, so it kind of felt like the writing was on the wall for Khalil Herbert, who had been, at times we would see him at like RB2, RB3-ish type value. There's even some flex appeal. But now heading over to a Bengals team that's going to be without Zach Moss, it looks like they're making this move. It's probably going to be an extended period of time without Zach Moss.
I think they said he was out for season.
Out for the season, yeah. They had to make this move.
I think they said at least for season too. Like it
could have been a lot worse. Damn. Yeah. Rest of the season. So offseason addition is Zach Moss. They needed to go get a guy like Khalil Herbert, who's, I think Chase Brown has fully immersed himself into like a top 15 option the rest of the season. But now we have Khalil Herbert in the fold. Do you think he has any flex value? Because the Bengals do typically like to use both of their backs.
I think this is just purely a move for depth. And I think that Khalil Herbert is honestly not a bad running back. I think he's a decent running back. So I think it just gives them a good number 2. Because the one thing that is interesting with Zach Moss and Chase Brown when he was still there, when Zach Moss was healthy, I mean, Zach Moss was playing on third downs. Khalil Herbert has never been a guy that's played on third downs in his entire career. So when I look at this kind of trade, I just think it gives them better depth behind Chase Brown, and Chase Brown is going to be the RB1 for this team. And now Khalil Herbert potentially becomes like a premium type of handcuff. I think that I'll see a little bit of volume. Obviously, this team does not want to give Chase Brown. I think he had like 32 touches this week. So they don't want to give him 32 touches, but it was also a blowout. So like in competitive games, back and forth games like this upcoming weekend, I expect Chase Brown to be a 70% snap share kind of guy, and Khalil will probably be like a 20%, especially this week. He probably won't even play that much, but going forward, just kind of a premium handcuff type of guy.
The one thing about the Bengals is that they have typically used like two backs. Like that's the one thing I'll say about him. So to me, even when like Joe Mixon's been there, and I know it's a different regime now, but like even when Joe Mixon was there this year with Zach Moss, Chase Brown, like they've kind of used two backs. And I don't know that Khalil Herbert plays well enough to take snaps away from Chase Brown, but I mean, Chase Brown hasn't been like elite, even when he's had a huge workload. He's been good, but not elite. So it kind of makes me think like maybe the veteran piece. Like I don't know that I don't know. I don't want to just vault Chase Brown. I know I said top 15. I don't want to just vault him in the top 15 because I think that'd be doing a disservice to a lot of the running backs that are already in the top 15. But if the workload stays the same, that's where I'd put him. I do see a world where Khalil Herbert
he's
does
an RB1
though.
If he sees the volume he's been seeing,
70%. So if he's over 70% of the snaps, you think he's an RB1? I think that's crazy.
This is one of the best offense in the league. Like if he's going to see 20 touches a game, he's an RB1. What running back are you going to have over him? Like obviously your elite guys.
Yeah, but I mean like guys like Aaron Jones. I put Aaron Jones over Chase Brown.
Aaron Jones a back on RB1.
Yeah, okay. James Conner.
Like more of a back end RB1.
No, we got like we already got like 10 locked in.
Who are the 10? You got like Kyron, Kamara,
Saquon, Derrick Henry. We got Achane, Walker, Bijan, Brees, like Taylor.
I would say he's right in that range.
Aaron Jones, James Conner.
Okay, he's right there with those guys.
James Cook.
So he's a back in RB1.
No, he's an RB2. He's an RB2.
I don't think he's back in RB1.
No. We got through 13 of them, and that's just off the top of the head.
I'm saying he's right there with Aaron Jones and James Conner. Like those are the kind of guys he now belongs with. And the only reason why people are going to say no is because in fantasy football he doesn't have the name. But if he goes out there and balls out the rest of the year, guess what? He's going to have the name now. So,
I think we're probably not thinking of all the. We got to.
Oh my gosh, that's all of them. What are you talking about?
This is where I'm looking at this now because now I want to see who the other running backs are.
He's a back in RB1. As long as he's a
mid-tier RB2. I think we're jumping the gun, calling him.
I want to say he's had now 2 20-point games in a row now. Like he's putting up elite numbers.
No, it's the second 20-point game of the season. He had one in week 4. Like,
all right,
he's in a Tony Pollard, DeAndre Swift range. Like,
what's his face was
David Montgomery is ahead of him. Like,
no. He's a back in RB1 with this volume.
No, there's no way. No way.
If he's playing 70-80% of the team snaps,
he's playing 70% of the snaps. I'll give him like top 15 is a stretch. I'd say he's in the 15-20 range. That's right. There's no way I'm putting him top 12. There's no way. Top 12 would be RB1.
I don't see like was Zach Moss now gone.
That hasn't changed shit. I think that's discrediting a lot of the other guys. We
RB1.
There's no way, bro.
Not elite.
No way.
Back in RB1.
Last trade that went through. This is probably a no big deal. Jonathan Mingo to the Cowboys. I think this is a laughing matter in all form and fashion for a 4th round pick. They could have went and got Deontay Johnson. They could have went and got DeAndre Hopkins. Instead, they decided to go get Jonathan Mingo. The Cowboys being the Cowboys. And they gave up more than what both of those teams gave up to get those veteran receivers. I don't really understand this move. Obviously, Brandon Cooks is on IR. You got Jalen Tolbert, who has been kind of mid, I would say. Not ass, but mid. And then CeeDee Lamb obviously dealing with an injury, but like to go get Jonathan Mingo, I really like. This is a move. I'm like, Jerry World, bro. Sometimes I don't know what's going on in Jerry's world, the real Jerry World up here. I don't know what's going on with this dude. And they could have used that draft pick to go get a different running back. Like, I just don't understand what the hell Jerry Jones is doing. Like, do you think that Jonathan Mingo, dynasty, redraft, keeper, the one wide receiver whose name is Jonathan Mingo leagues, is there any value at all for Jonathan Mingo?
No. I don't really understand either. The only saving grace that I will say, I don't even.
There's none.
He's not been good. Like it's as simple as that. I don't know. Because the other thing too is just like we were saying earlier, this could get ugly for Dallas where you're becoming a top 12 pick Like, why give up picks? I don't understand for a guy that he hasn't done anything throughout his entire career. Maybe he's, low on the depth chart now, but that's for a reason because he's not good. Like he
Yeah.
good. I don't know. There NFL teams, and this, like NFL teams are just always in the situation sometimes where they're like, we can save this person. We can make this person be good if we just get him on our team. We can give him the right resources and the right tools and the right coaching to help him be better. And it's just like 9 times out of 10, these things don't work out. And I think it's one of those situations where they're like, oh, they probably like Jonathan Mingo a little bit in the pre-draft process, and now he's buried on the depth chart. They're like, oh, we could probably get him for a
How did
cheap.
they finesse a 4th round pick is the craziest parts to me.
I
I'm
don't
like,
know.
they
Like, it's
finessed a
just
4th round pick out of that for a believe, like I believe type player. Like
that's how
you couldn't
some
make it
teams
on
are.
you couldn't make it on the Panthers. You couldn't make
I
it on
mean,
the
you could have just
Panthers.
you should. Well, I don't. Again, once again, I don't know if this team is looking to try to compete or what they're doing, but you could have just gotten Mike Williams for a 5th round pick and had a better chance to maybe win right now if that's what you're trying to do. Maybe they think he's a developmental process. I don't know. It's kind of stupid. I think it's a really bad trade.
Well, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about Jonathan Mingo because it looks like outside of the defense, we got a couple
Has there
nice
been any more?
moves. Been no other moves. Preston
No.
Smith just got traded. So
Oh, to the
yeah,
Steelers.
that was it. The Steelers are trying to make a Super Bowl
Look
run
at
here.
the
Yeah,
Steelers.
no.
I mean, they have to, right? I mean, you got Russ on a $1 million deal. You got to
Yeah.
go all in.
Hey, the Steelers. I think a lot of people were counting them up. They were heading into this week. I think they were underdogs this week too. Which I'm like, there's no way it should be underdogs. Forget who they're
Against
playing, but they're
the Commanders. They're playing the Commanders.
yeah, they're a dog on the road to the Commanders, which made no sense to me. But anyway, guys, that does it for week 10. No breaking news on the show. I'm sure the minute we hit stop
Yeah.
record, there will be
Hold
some
on
kind
one
of
sec. I
major,
saw one
major
thing.
move.
No.
But we'll be back a little bit later this week to talk some updates heading into week 10. We'll see you next time.